Hello, good evening and welcome to BizFirst Review 360, your weekly dose of the top business stories and developments impacting the economy. I'm Nadim Majid. Let's get on with the program. On our top story tonight, Hilton has signed a deal to manage 6 new properties in Sri Lanka. I sat down with William Costley, Hilton's Vice President of Operations in Southeast Asia and India, to find out more about the project. The face of tourism in Sri Lanka is changing rapidly, and this was evidenced by the fact that earlier this week the global hospitality giant Hilton signed a landmark deal to manage 6 new properties across the island. I'm sitting down this evening with Mr. William Costley, the Vice President of Operations for Hilton in Southeast Asia and India. William, thank you very much for joining us on BizFirst Review 360. Let me start by asking you first and foremost, why Sri Lanka, and why Sri Lanka specifically at this point in time?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to have a discussion with you. Why Sri Lanka and why this moment in time? Well, Sri Lanka, in terms of tourism, is really still in its infancy. Sri Lanka really only started to propel real tourism numbers after the cessation of the war in 2009. And since 2010 to 2016, we've seen Sri Lanka's tourism go from about 600,000 tourists a year, and last year actually broke the 2 million visitor arrival mark, which is an amazing growth year on year for any country. So if you think about it, it's still very much in its infancy. Obviously, moving forward, we see a massive opportunity for tourism to grow well beyond this. And the government's target is 4 million visitors by 2020. And I personally feel, and I know our company does, that this number will be exceeded. And in the years ahead, tourism will become a major force with regards to GDP and foreign reserves for this country.
And do you think that Hilton, with its customer base, can carve out a slice of the pie in Sri Lanka? Actually,
this year is celebrating 30 years in Sri Lanka. So first of all, we have a very rich heritage and history in the country. A lot of our travellers who come and can only actually stay in Colombo with Hilton tell us, why don't we have hotels in other parts of the country, be it a corporate guest or a leisure guest. So we, and coupled with our 60 million Hilton Honors guests globally, we feel that this partnership with Melwa Hotels and Resorts strategically is fantastic for us, and we have every confidence that we'll be very successful, and guests will want to stay at Hilton all over Sri Lanka.
William, one of the concerns in the past has been the lack of infrastructure. For example, travel times between Colombo and outstation areas. Such conveniences were lacking in the past, and there's not really been much movement in terms of infrastructure development. Now, in relation to a couple of your properties, I suppose with Kandy, etc., you do have the Central Expressway coming up, and with Yala, the Southern Expressway.
Yeah.
But are there any areas of concern for you right now?
Well, if you think over 2 million tourists came to Sri Lanka and enjoyed the country, with, as you quite rightly say, is an infrastructure which is developing like tourism. Kandy will have an express highway by 2019, the Central Express Highway, as you mentioned. What was very interesting, when the airport actually had to close during the day for the essential repairs, there was an enormous amount of air traffic that went down south. Now, that strategically for me is the airport that can open up the whole of the south and east coast for tourism. So there is a secondary airport where the real leisure traveller who wants a beach experience could fly direct. You know, many countries like Thailand, for example, or when you fly to Phuket, you don't go via Bangkok. When you go to Bali, you don't go via Jakarta. So there is a big market, especially for leisure travellers, who would love to fly direct to the tourist destination and within 45 minutes be in their hotel. And the airport down south is a great example where you can get to Aragon Bay, you can get to Yala, Hambantota is obviously there, you can go the other way, and you can open up the whole of the south coast. So
it's a funny thing that you mentioned about the secondary airport. You're talking, of course, about the international airport in Mattala. It would seem that a lot of individuals in positions of power don't share your thoughts on the potential of the Mattala International Airport. Have you got that feeling from policymakers here that might not be a... when it started out, it was painted as a white elephant by many in the opposition when their project was first undertaken. You're saying that it could be a great potential to bring in tourists, leisure travelers.
All I can say is if you take best practice from other countries in Asia, and as I said, if you take Phuket, for example, Phuket will get close to 7 million visitors for an island in Thailand. Now obviously if they had to go via Bangkok, those numbers would diminish significantly, or Koh Samui, for example, or as I said, Bali. So when you look at the potential of allowing a guest direct access to a place they want to go on vacation, you do see that there's an increase in tourists. A great example of that was when it was made easy to come to Sri Lanka with the e-visa. Now, in the past it was, I think a lot of travellers who came to Sri Lanka were put off a lot because it was very difficult just to get a visa. But when it was made easy, when it was accessible, by default, tourism increased. And we see that in other countries in Asia as well. So all I could say is the more access you give tourists to experience a destination, they will come when you make it easy.
William, now Hilton's going to be managing 6 new properties in Sri Lanka, so that clearly means that the company has faith that the tourism sector will continue to grow at this rate or even faster in Sri Lanka. Why?
Many reasons. Number one, as I just said, it's really only 6 years where people truly saw Sri Lanka as a destination for a vacation. Sadly, because of the war in the past, a lot of countries had travel warnings, so even if people wanted to come to Sri Lanka, they couldn't. Now all that's gone. So number one is that many people haven't had an opportunity to experience it. Secondly, it's strategically placed. So for a Western guest, for a Middle East guest, for an Asian guest, it's quite easy to get to. And fundamentally, there is so much to experience in this island. You have culture, you have climate differences. If you go to Norelia, you can go and see tea plantations. The climate's 10, 12 degrees, sometimes cooler. There's a great rich heritage in the central belt of Sri Lanka. You can have a beach experience. You can have a heritage experience. You can actually even go, there's very few places in Asia where you can go to a wildlife reserve. So when you've got all that encompassed in a small island, strategically located, where people hadn't had an opportunity to experience before, all that is a recipe for success for tourism. And I see a very bright future for Sri Lanka with tourism in many parts of the country.
William, I'd also like to ask you, there have been complaints in the past about the service quality in Sri Lanka. Do you think that there's a problem here? Do you think that there's room for improvement?
I think everywhere there's always room for improvement. The day that you think you're doing good service is the day you have to be very careful. So for Hilton, we will never be happy with the service we provide. We will continually to try to improve it. It is obvious as more hotels open, more restaurants open in different cities, that it means new team members have to come on board into the industry, which if they're not trained properly, if they're not given the right service standards to work to, then obviously that could compromise service. So our focus is a lot on training. We must train and grow and develop our teams to give the service that our international guest expects when they come to Sri Lanka. So because it is a growth industry, certainly there is areas where training and service needs to be improved. And that's one of the major things within Hilton that we really focus on. That when we open a new property, that everybody is fully trained. And we're blessed because we have a very strong pool of team members in Sri Lanka, at the Hilton here, and at the JIC, as everybody calls it, the Hilton Residences. So we're blessed with a very big pool of team members who don't all come from Colombo. They would love to go back home to our station. So we're blessed with a talented Hilton DNA resource that when we open some of these hotels in Sri Lanka, we can take that expertise back home, and it's win-win for them. They go home, and at the same time they develop and they will help train others in their local communities.
3 of the 6 new properties that you will be opening up are resorts.
Yep.
What segment of traveller are you targeting with these 6 new properties? You said that tourism has been growing in Sri Lanka. We've seen high-end business travellers, backpackers even coming into the country.
Sure.
Where does Hilton, where do these new properties,
Sure.
and where does Hilton figure into this equation?
Well, obviously, I think you would need to look at each hotel and each location where it will be operating, because there's a diversity of markets and segments based on the location in Sri Lanka. So, for example, if you take Kandy, Kandy will be, obviously, there'll be corporate guests who would like to go and do business in Kandy. There'll be the leisure guest who's doing maybe the cultural triangle, or even coupled with a beach resort experience as well. So, first of all, for the guests who come for the 10-day long stay, well, they want to try a little bit of everything. All our hotels are strategically located where they can go from one Hilton or one DoubleTree to the next. So that strategically for us is critical, because we keep a guest for 10 days or 7 days when they're in the country. If you take a place like Kandy as well, we will have big event space and social events, so that obviously there's a big local market for weddings and social activities. If you take Yala, for example, it will probably be more likely a more premier level guest, as it will be a more smaller boutique style property, so the rates will be much higher and much more luxury. And then Koskoda and Negombo will be, you know, a leisure traveller who's predominantly coming probably for a vacation and a beach experience.
I'd finally like to ask you, now the openings for all 6 properties have been scheduled between 2020 and 2021.
Yeah.
Is that overly ambitious?
No.
All right, thank you very much, William, for speaking to BizFirst Review 360. Wish you all the best.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Coming up after the break, vital statistics reflecting the health of the economy. Welcome back to the program. The Island Statistics Office says that inflation spiked in March 2017 while unemployment dropped in the last quarter of 2016. There has also been a dip in tourist arrivals in March 2017. Let's take a look.
The Department of Census and Statistics said inflation climbed to 7.3% year-on-year in March 2017, following a 6.8% spike in February amid a depreciating rupee. Data shows the Colombo Consumer Price Index, or the CCPI, rising steadily from October 2016, climbing from 112.1 points to 116.7 points in March 2016. Year-on-year inflation of the food group has increased from 7.7% in February to 9.2% in March 2017, and the non-food group has increased from 6.4% to 6.5% during this period. Sri Lanka's unemployment has dropped to 4.2% in the fourth quarter of last year from 4.4% a year earlier. Most of the jobs were created in the services and industrial sectors, while the agricultural sector was flat amid a drought. During the fourth quarter of 2016, the total number of employed people in Sri Lanka was estimated at about 8 million, of which about 46.7% engaged in the service sector, 27.6% in agricultural sector, and 25.7% in the industry sector. Tourist arrivals rose 3.4% in the first 3 months of 2017 to 604,953 despite a daytime closure of the main international airport, but arrivals in March dropped 2.5% to 188,076 year-on-year. Visitors from India dropped 10.3% to 27,075 in March. Maldives dropped to 10% to 8,076, and Pakistan also dropped 10.4% to 2,433, taking South Asian arrivals down 9.9% to 39,804.
Air cargo handled by Sri Lankan Airlines suffered a revenue loss due to the closure of the Bandaranaike International Airport owing to the refurbishment of the runway.
Air cargo handled by Sri Lankan Airlines have suffered an estimated revenue loss of around $8 million owing to the runway of the island's main international airport being closed for repairs.
I think we were looking at about $8 to $10 million, largely because of our network cargo not being able to connect, especially if you look at our South Indian departures out of in the evening, which should generally connect our Middle Eastern flights out of Colombo. That just happens towards the evening around 6 o'clock, 6:30. So as a result of the airport only opening at 4:30, we had a few problems, but I must say special thanks should go to the operations people and the operators at the ramp. We've managed 75% of the business still.
Debt-burdened Sri Lankan Airlines axed flights to Paris and Frankfurt last October and November to avoid losses and stiff competition. The airline said the termination of flights to Europe has further impacted revenue with an estimated annual loss of $10 to $12 million.
Actually, cargo is becoming a very critical factor when it comes to the total company revenue because no more are the days that you have very high fares or you have extremely high business class passenger factors. So what contributes on the belly of the aircraft is very critical. It contributes something like 11% to the total company revenue. Unfortunately, due to various changes in the schedules, especially with Europe going off since last winter, we've had a dip in our revenue and of course the global markets, because there's been a heavy increase of passenger capacity by most of the Middle Eastern carriers. So that has developed a situation where capacity is higher than the demand of air freight, which has basically put a lot of markets under threat, or I would say at price war.
Let's take a look at some other stories that made headlines this week.
The Faculty of Business of the Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology conducted its annual workshop on soft skills for the 5th consecutive year recently. The workshop was aimed at improving soft skills such as teamwork, problem solving, leadership, creative thinking, as well as analytical thinking among advanced level school children in both public and private schools. 73 teams from 42 schools participated in the preliminary rounds held in Kandy, Malabe, Kurunegala and Jaffna, out of which 32 teams were selected to participate in the grand finale. St. Bridget's Convent team emerged champions, while teams from Visakha Vidyalaya were adjudged first and second runners-up in a highly competitive inter-school quiz that covered areas such as current developments in local and international business, globalization, international trade and business communications.
Coming up after the break, the industry's sentiments over the government's decision to allow the assembly of vehicles in Sri Lanka using imported spare parts. Welcome back to Biz First Review 360. The Ceylon Motor Traders Association, an affiliate of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, says that the government's decision to allow vehicle assembly using imported spare parts will be detrimental to government regulations, the industry, and to consumer safety. Why? Well, I sat down with the chairman of CMTA to find out more. The Ceylon Motor Traders Association, the umbrella organization representing motor industry stakeholders in this country, has raised concerns this week regarding plans by the government to introduce vehicle assembly using imported spare parts. I'm sitting down this evening with Mr. Riza Rauf, who's the chairman of the CMTA, to talk about these concerns. What are they? So, Mr. Rauf, thank you very much again for being on Biz First Review 360.
My pleasure.
Please enlighten us with what specifically your concerns are and how is this harmful to the country, these plans?
Thank you very much, Nadim. But I think first of all I need to correct one point which you made on this concern, imported spare parts. It's not imported spare parts, it's imported used spare parts. There's a big difference there. So as a CMTA, we are very concerned with the government allowing to import used spare parts and allowing a certain individual to assemble motor vehicles and to be sold in the country, which are very old. So this draws us, like there is a lot of concern for us in terms of public safety and things like that.
So you have obviously raised these concerns in the past few months with the government. Have your statements or have your letters, have you been acknowledged? Have your concerns been acknowledged? Have any attempts been made to assuage your concerns?
Well, this whole operation started, I think, way back in 2003 or 4, if I'm not mistaken. But since then, the CMTA has been very concerned about it and has been bringing up this issue from time to time to the relevant authorities. So, since of late there had been something coming up. I mean, they have allowed it again. So, this is why we have brought this up again and brought it to the attention of the relevant authorities, exposing the danger of this. So, I hope they will look at it positively and take appropriate action in order to stop this scam.
Mr. Rauf, we saw that recently the government had taken steps to encourage the re-export of vehicles which are older than 5 years. How do you see this new decision in light of that policy?
Yeah, it's contradicting, because, you know, as you rightfully said, in the last budget, the government also brought in a proposal where they would encourage for vehicles which are over 5 years old for re-export, so that the country will have continuously brand new vehicles, and that will save a lot on spare parts and so on, and also it's good for emission standards. But then this, if you take, it's totally contradicted, because these vehicles are basically over 10 years old, I would say. There is no specific age limit. You see, even the country regulation permits only vehicles which are only up to 3 years old to be brought in. But here there is no specific age limit. And the other danger is that once these cars are assembled, and the customer will not know exactly the year of manufacture of these vehicles.
You mentioned in your statement that any decision taken in extending the life of obsolete vehicles assembled from used spare parts could be a strain on the country's balance sheet.
Yes.
How exactly does this affect the country's balance sheet? Negatively?
Yeah, like if you take in terms of revenue to the government, we are talking what is government is losing. You see, you can bring a container loads of spare parts, and you wouldn't know exactly how many vehicles that you are assembling, and those would go at very low prices. So thereby, there will be a loss of revenue to the government. Whereas against, if you take a brand new vehicle, there is a certain set figure that the government is getting it out of it. But that all that revenue will be lost in this.
But when the government does introduce things like this, vehicle assembly, imported used spare parts, with the proper regulatory mechanisms, won't it help to promote manufacturing and introduce complexity to exports?
Well, encouraging assembly is good, and this is not manufacturing, this is you're importing used spare parts. You're getting junk, you're basically bringing in junk to the country and trying to assemble and do it.
Why would, what rationale would prompt this kind of decision to get, as you say, junk? It sounds more like a chop shop than a...
It's exactly, because the thing is, now say for example, if we are going to import as importers or franchise holders, we would import a brand new vehicle, or any, for that matter anybody is importing, they will know exactly what they are bringing in. This, until this comes into the country, you don't know what you are really getting in that container. You don't know how old the spare parts are. I mean, I wouldn't say spare parts, those are all junk parts, probably cut cars and accident vehicles they removed from different cars, and what they are basically trying to do is bring it here and then assemble together.
So when the CMTA raises such concerns, I mentioned earlier, has it been acknowledged, and have any attempts been made to assuage your concerns? Have any authorities in government come and told you, no, look, I understand what you're saying, but also this is what we think?
Well, CMTA has been highlighting this issue over and over again and bringing it up to the attention of those relevant authorities. But so far we haven't seen anything positive happening in this regard. So this is why we are also very concerned. This is why we are taking up the matter and at least trying to enlighten the public to be aware of this kind of thing.
When you say, we were talking earlier about the importance of regulation even in vehicle assembly, in the process of vehicle assembly. If regulation is introduced, a proper regulatory mechanism, if there is a proper regulatory mechanism, would you be in favor of, even if it's imported used spare parts, with a certain shelf life, let's say 3 years or under 3 years or something? Do you think that, do you see a scenario where this could work?
Well, the point is how you are going to procure this. This is the main problem. You cannot get them the way you say it. You cannot procure used spare parts as such. What is basically coming in is junk. This is our concern. So, in a situation like that, I don't think I can endorse anything of that sort.
Riza, thank you very much for speaking to BizFirst Review 360 and for enlightening us on your position and why you all have adopted this stance. It'd be interesting to see what the response will be from the competent authorities. Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
On the show.
Pleasure.
Thank you. And that's a wrap of our program for tonight. Don't forget to look us up on Facebook. You'll find us at BizFirst Review 360. I'll see you again, same time, same place next week.